meeting of the Committee on Climate and Energy to order, and we do have a quorum. We do have some minutes from last week to pass. Representative Kraft, would you like to move the minutes?
Madam Chair, so moved.
And we're moving the minutes from January 4th. Any discussion on the minutes? Seeing no discussion, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Motion prevails and the minutes are approved. Before we move on, I want to just take a second, and when we started earlier or last week, we had an opportunity for everybody to take a minute and introduce themselves to committee, and we had a missing member who is here today. So maybe Representative Garofalo, can you take a minute and just introduce yourself to the committee, please?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And first of all, congratulations on your appointment as committee chair. Pat Garofalo, I represent the city of Farmington, as well as portions of rural Dakota, Goodhue, and Rice counties. And since you've given me the microphone, Madam Chair, I do want to quasi-apologize for something that happened at our meeting. So for those who didn't notice, I came in late at the first meeting. And when I sat down, I made a gesture towards the Republican side of the aisle that people thought maybe I meant to be intended towards the testifier or the chair. It wasn't. What had happened was I had driven my car into a snowbank and a ditch on the way here, and I was mad at myself because I was just driving too fast, and so I was making a self-deprecating comment of gesture about myself. But unbeknownst to me, apparently, people who didn't know that thought maybe I was commenting about you or the testifier, and I would never do that. In fact, if there's one thing you know, it's what I can keep a secret, and I'll never tell anyone about the time you and I were in Hawaii together.
My sons remember it well.
It's true, we were in Hawaii.
Yes, we were.
So, but I will never tell anyone about it.
Okay, good. I'm so glad it's
So,
secret.
Madam Chair, thank you, and thanks for giving me a call to let me explain that, because sometimes something like that can just get things set up in the wrong way, and I would never do that. So.
Well, I appreciate that. So glad everybody's here today. And we're going to talk a little bit about the federal programs that are available for Minnesota to be a part in, the IIJA and the Inflation Reduction Act. And so we have some testifiers today, or presenters, that will talk a little bit about it from many different perspectives. There's a lot of opportunity within these programs for benefit to all parts of our state. And so first we have Director John Kelly from the Department of Commerce, who is going to come. He's the Director of Government Affairs, and he's going to come talk to us a little bit about the agency and the work that they hope to be able to do around this. So please introduce yourself for the record when you're ready and proceed with your testimony.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members. For the record, my name is John Kelly. I'm the Director of Government Affairs at the Minnesota Department of Commerce. I'm excited to be here with you all in person. I didn't hit a snowbank, but I did have trouble finding a parking spot in the admin ramp, so I'm glad to be here in one piece. The Commerce Department, we have been monitoring closely the developments both in the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, IIJA, and the Inflation Reduction Act, IRA, the energy-related provisions of those bills, and this deck is going to give a bit of an overview and walk through some of the other opportunities and items that we're tracking. The Clean Energy and Power received the third largest amount of funding in the infrastructure bill. Opportunities cover a wide array of clean energy transition projects, including grid modernization, new electricity transmission, building energy efficiency, building code updating, hydrogen hubs, energy system reliability, resilience updates, and more. Commerce's work in this space focuses on improving the lives of Minnesotans, submitting or supporting proposals which improve grid reliability and resilience, reducing energy usage and energy bills to develop and train our clean energy workforce, reduce the building's use of energy, and support utilization and implementation of new technologies and processes. I won't be covering electric vehicles. I know there's a lot of interest in that, but the Department of Transportation is leading out on that for the enterprise. Hey, there we go. Thank you, Mike. So that's this chart here. It shows the different portions of the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, our helpful arrow shows the gray area for energy, power, and electric grid reliability, which is $107.5 billion. So the Inflation Reduction Act it was passed in August of last year. 2/3 of the funding for Inflation Reduction Act, and probably the key difference between the infrastructure bill and the Inflation Reduction Act, is that the form is in federal tax cuts. So there are a range of tax credits applying across multiple sectors, including buildings, transportation, energy, and natural resources. Commerce will focus on rebate programs established under the Inflation Reduction Act and support the Department of Revenue and members of the legislature as they manage the tax credit programs. So this first slide, I'm going to start going into the IAJA commerce items that have been submitted to date. So the first, there are so many different opportunities here in the Inflation Reduction Act that we have come to start referring to them by their number, so their opportunity number. So this 40108, the State Energy Security Plan, we submitted that on September 30th, 2022. It is a revision to the historic State Energy Assurance Plan. It is a requirement to submit this to receive both base and IAJA formula state energy funding. This baseline document incorporates 6 major elements. It addresses energy resources, energy profile of production, transmission, distribution, and end use. It addresses potential hazards, provides risk assessment, and provides risk mitigation approach and coordination of planning and response. This first-year draft was submitted to September 30th and is required to be revised annually. And then 40109 is the State Energy Security Plan formula funding. This was set forth by DOE to provide funding to states to support electric transmission. We submitted this. We submitted this on December 5th with the goal to build on the State Energy Security Plan. So keep it moving here. This also here in the Weatherization Assistance Program, in the fall of 2021, Commerce established a bipartisan informal weatherization working group. It was made up of the work of the then energy chairs, additional legislators, stakeholders, and the service provider network. This working group identified 8 key areas for the program to continue to lean into. While federal funding through US DOE has some particular limitations through the IAJA and formula and non-IAJA competitive opportunities, we are actively pursuing the 4 areas that we can with federal funds. So those are stabilizing program funding, ensuring equitable service, expanding program services, and partnering and innovating. And to the lesser extent we can do the other 4 within the confines of federal funds, we are trying to address deferrals, streamline processes, expand the weatherization workforce, and address supply chain issues. Many of the members will recall from the last session, the Jobs and Energy Conference Committee report included general fund dollars for pre-weatherization and workforce training, and general fund dollars do not have the same restrictions around weatherization that the federal dollars do. So that was one of the reasons why we were pursuing that last session. So on September 30th, 2022, Commerce submitted the weatherization formula application with a total of $76 million over the next 5 years. In addition, we have pursued or are pursuing 4 competitive non-IIJ funding awards, the first 2 of which have been awarded to the state already. So the first is the Weather Resistive Advanced Prefab or WRAP project, which is a pilot program being completed in conjunction with the University of Minnesota. The second is the Weatherization Innovation Through Roofing and Electrification WIRE Access project. And this $2 million grant will allow for a pilot project of making 85 otherwise deferred homes not only weatherization ready, but also electrification ready through roofing and electrical upgrades. We've also submitted a community scale pilot project for over $400,000 to maximize economies of scale to deliver full weatherization services. And we've also submitted another grant application that would allow for high performance window treatment. It's a lot of stuff. Let me make sure I'm There we go. There are a number of formula IAJ applications under development. First is the Energy and Efficiency and Conservation Block Grant. I think you're going to hear more about that from CEE. And then also the Energy Efficiency Revolving Loan Fund. Also the Preventing Outages and Enhancing the Resilience of the Electric Grid, known as Hazard Hardening, and that is opportunity 40101D. This is part of a suite of IAJ opportunities, the rest of which are competitive. So these ones are Formula Ones. Most of the opportunities from DOE in the infrastructure bill are competitive opportunities that entities and the state will be competing for. Our team is currently working on the department's application covering both 1 year and year one, which is due on the 31st of March. Once that plan is approved, funds will be subgranted to eligible entities, grid operators, generators, providers through an in-state competition. The program requires a 15% cost share from state and tribal participants. Subgrant from the state must also contribute 100% cost match for funds that are awarded. Continuing on the competitive applications under development, so these two are the Grid Innovation and the Hydrogen Hub. So the first, the Grid Innovation Project, the Joint Targeted Interconnection Queue Project, would fund 5 transmission projects in 7 Midwest states. So that would be Minnesota, North Dakota, South Dakota, Iowa, Missouri, Kansas, and Nebraska, and has strong partners in the MISO and Southwest Power Pool and Excel. The total project cost for this one is $1.6 billion. This project proposes an innovative partnership between states, rural transmission, regional transmission organizations, utilities, interconnection customers, and outlines a new cost allocation proposal and mechanism to fund major interregional transmission projects developed through the new interregional planning process. The second project being pursued is the Midwest Coordinated Regional and Community Resilience Advancement Project. Commerce would apply for on behalf of MREA and MMUA. The total project cost on that is $400 million. This would fund innovative grid improvements via targeted transmission improvements to increase the capacity around existing lines. And the other opportunity there, the Regional Hydrogen Hub, the IIJA allocated over $8 billion for regional clean hydrogen hubs. For this initial launch, the Department of Energy envisions selecting between 6 to 10 hydrogen hubs and funding at between half a billion and $1 billion apiece, for a total of $6 to $7 billion. There's a 50% cost share requirement on that. That is not meaning that the state has to come up with the 50% of that. It's a total collective match. The state of Minnesota is currently participating in 2 hydrogen hubs applications. There was not a limit to the amount of hydrogen hub applications that you could participate in. The first was a Midwest hydrogen hub that included Wisconsin, Ohio, Illinois, Indiana, Kentucky, Michigan, and Minnesota. That was not encouraged for submitting a full application. However, the second hydrogen hub that we participate in with North Dakota, Montana, and Wisconsin, the Heartland Hydrogen Hub, has been encouraged by the Department of Energy to submit a full application, and that is due in April of this year. The proposal and development submission is being handled by the Energy and Environment Research Center in Grand Forks, North Dakota. All right. In the interest of time, the next 3 slides I will skim over, but I included so that you will have information on these other areas of development and forthcoming that we are actively pursuing. There's a focus in both the IIJA and the IRA on resilient and efficient codes implementation. So these opportunities here, there's both the 40551, resilient and efficient code implementation, and 50131, the assistance for the latest and zero energy building code adoption. On this slide, you'll see the additional transmission opportunities in the Inflation Reduction Act that we will be tracking, from financing to grants for the siting of interstate transmission lines, for funding large-scale and rural cooperative loans. This next slide here, it shows some more opportunities And I will note, opportunities are not limited to the areas that I've previously mentioned. As you know, there are also competitive opportunities around air capture, efficiency in schools, and water and wastewater treatment plants, among others. While our staffing capacity is currently limited to pursue all of these opportunities, we are tracking and communicating everything we can so that to help others bring dollars into Minnesota. And finally, by way of Inflation Reduction Act opportunities, I would like to highlight 2 formula grant programs that will be developed and administered by the department. These are 2 programs for states to offer rebates on home energy efficiency and electrification projects. These programs are referred to by HOMES, or HEERHRA. The Minnesota State Energy Office within the department will receive funds after a state-approved application is submitted. The submittal must be done by August of 2024, though depending on when we receive guidance from the Department of Energy, we will naturally work to pursue the funding sooner. Minnesota will receive around $74 million for each program, and will need to spend down the funds by September of 2031. As more is learned, we welcome an opportunity to come back and share these details for these programs. I will note that for both of these programs, contractor workforce is important, and Inflation Reduction Act includes a state-based home energy efficiency contractor training grant to support these rebate programs that we plan to pursue. And then lastly, there are requests for information here that are as part of the grant development process from the Department of Energy. They also send out requests for information to inform the design of their program. One such set of RFIs are focused on workforce development, which I've noted here and raised for your awareness, but also businesses and organizations and individuals are all invited to submit ideas for consideration by the Department of Energy. So I just ran through a ton of information very quickly and somewhat poorly, but I have some links here in our deck, and I believe members have in their packets, and we're happy to share. There are a lot of guidebooks, both from the Department of Energy and the White House, as well as on the Commerce website. We just updated our website as of this morning, so it should be easier to find than previously. We also have a inbox for federal funding questions. So if you have folks in your district that are looking at projects and are interested, one, you of course can send them my way as the Director of Government Affairs, but we also have an inbox that human beings monitor. It's called fedquestions.commerce@state.mn.us, and we also send out a federal funds opportunities email fairly frequently. I think the chairs and ranking member are on that currently, but we can always expand that if you or your staff would like to be on that. And that's a very lot of information to share. Happy to come back and answer questions and stand for questions here.
Well, thank you, Mr. Kelly. I really appreciate that. That was a lot of information, and I'm glad that there are resources on the website, both to access information and to point folks to. And so that's great. I think what we'll do is maybe take 10 minutes for questions now before we move on to the rest, just because that was so much information. So I think first on the list, we have Representative Swazinski.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you, too, for your presentation. Just want to go back to be page 5 in your slide, the State Energy Security Plan, the SESP portion. Yep. I just wanted to chat a little bit if you could talk about the governor's priorities when it comes to in the plan. We've had some grid attacks here in the last month, 2 months with attacks on substations and the rest. What priorities and how does the governor plan on addressing that within the state of Minnesota when it comes to security concerns?
Yeah, I mean, item 3 of the document is the plan. Part of that plan is to address potential hazards in each energy sector or system, including physical and cybersecurity threats. I'm not going to speak for the governor. I will say that the State Energy Office here in Minnesota, which is responsible for submitting and maintaining that plan, has submitted their plans to address that. I believe I can get that security plan to you if you want to review it, and I can, this presentation was originally supposed to be done by our State Energy Office Director and Deputy Commissioner. However, she wasn't able to be here today. So if there's a theme through this 10 minutes, it's going to be me saying that we're happy to follow up offline and get you whatever required documents that you may have.
Thank you.
Representative Swazinski, do you
Thank
have
you.
a follow-up?
Yeah, I do. Thank you, Madam Chair. And then on page 8 of the presentation, the 40103, the Grid Innovation Program, of that $1.06 billion, and you mentioned a little bit with the cost share and how that will get roped. That's not necessarily cost share as state money, but cost share as an industry money. So levies on ratepayers, is that what that means,
Mr. Kelly?
Madam Chair?
Yes, Madam Chair, Representative, I think that, so you may recall the governor's budget and the conference committee report for jobs and energy last year included the state competitiveness fund. And the goal of that fund was to provide matching dollars both for entities and utilities to help defray that cost that would normally be passed on to ratepayers. That was not included, that did not pass last session. However, I believe there's strong inclination from both the legislature and the administration to have those matching funds as well as the technical assistance needed to be competitive for these opportunities. So I don't want to look into the future, but I believe that the goal from last year, and I believe it's a continued goal, the governor's budget is not out yet, is to help utilities and other interested entities be competitive and have those match dollar requirements.
Representative Swazinski.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And just kind of follow up to that, just kind of looking forward to that portion. But how much as a percentage do you believe will be committed towards grid updating? Not necessarily so is an aging infrastructure rather than just provide more taxpayer relieved funds for hookups.
Mr. Kelly.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair, Representative. I believe that there are a number of opportunities that are not just about new transmission. There are large transmission projects that are being planned from MISO that have funding from the Infrastructure Act, but there are also competitive opportunities around grid resiliency and updates that are trying to get, and that's one of the reasons why we wanted to have those matching funds last session too, is that we want to try to help, especially the munis and co-ops, both on the technical side to apply for the competitive fund, but also to help update that grid resilience infrastructure. So I don't think it's all new. I think there's a lot of potential to improve existing infrastructure as well.
Representative Swazinski.
Thank you. And then you can pass this either on to other staff or just a general question. But that like $1.06 billion, will that, when that money is spent, will that help reduce inflation?
I hope so.
Mr. Kelly.
Member the chair, Chair and Representative, yeah, I can check.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Representative Kraft.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Kelly, thank you for putting together this presentation. I'm glad someone is tracking all the various opportunities to invest here. One question, though, is a significant part of the IRA is tax credits that are not competitive grants. Were those mentioned in here? And if so, please point me to where. And then what are your thoughts on how Commerce can help our citizens and businesses and other non-governmental organizations take advantage of those?
Mr. Kelly.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Representative. So the IRA overview slide is on slide 4. I believe that we chose to focus on the parts of the Inflation Reduction Act that we are going to be actively involved in, and our folks in the Energy Division are trained to deal with. We are not tax experts at the Department of Commerce, so we are going to be working closely with the Department of Revenue. We also are going to try to find opportunities to make connections not only with interested stakeholders and folks in Minnesota, but also with the legislature, with the Department of Energy, so you can ask those questions to the folks who are charged with implementing these programs.
Representative Kraft, do you have
Thank
a
you.
follow-up?
No.
Next on the list is Representative O'Neill.
Thank you, Madam Chair. On page 8, I'm really interested in the hydrogen hub projects, and you said one was asked to not continue the submission. what the Heartland proposal was. Can you just tell us just a little bit about what that Heartland proposal was and what was the project that they're now going to be doing a full submission on?
Mr. Kelly.
Madam Chair, Representative. So on the Heartland Hub, we are one participant of a group of folks. However, I can't go into the details on the project as the EERC that is running and leading the Heartland project is not fully sharing publicly because of trade secret risks. So as soon as we have more information that we can share out, we will. But at this time, we don't have a ton of information about what exactly the details of the proposal are. The first phase was to submit a partial application. They've now been encouraged to submit a full application, and I believe that as that steps progress, we will be able to share out more. I don't have a ton to share, unfortunately.
Representative O'Neill, did you have a follow-up?
No, because he doesn't have anything to tell us. So
Didn't know if there's other questions. you had.
there you go. Thank you.
Anyone else have any questions before we move on to the rest? Oh, I'm so sorry, Representative Igo.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My question, Mr. Kelly, is just about on page 10. I just want to make sure I heard you right. The regional direct air capture hubs, did you say that the department is not going for any of those grants?
Let me see here. So we are, Madam Chair, Representative, we are tracking for the financing here, and let me get some more back. I have some more background here. So let me just take a look here. All right, so there is we are pursuing a competitive application with a core partnership team led by the Center for Energy and Environment, the Department of Labor and Industry, the U of M Center for Sustainable Building Research, and others. The concept paper is due on January 31st. And so, let's see here. That is on, that is on building codes. So there's a number of these projects on here, but I don't know the answer for that off the top of my head, but I can follow up with you offline.
Anything else, Representative Igo?
Thank you, please do. That's obviously a ton of money, and Minnesota has a great potential here in this market, so thank you.
Any other questions before we move on to the rest? Seeing none. Thank you, Mr. Kelly. Appreciate your presentation and all of the energy that went into putting it all together and monitoring all these opportunities for us. Next, we are going to turn to local units of government and cities. Daniel Lightfoot and Craig Johnson with the Minnesota League of Cities. Can you please come up and introduce yourself for the record and proceed with your testimony?
Well, thank you, Madam Chair and members. Good afternoon. My name is Daniel Lightfoot, and I am an intergovernmental relations representative and manager of federal relations with the League of Minnesota Cities. My colleague Craig Johnson is actually, I believe, triple booked right now. So you will most often see my colleague Craig in this committee because he handles energy and environment issues for the League. But you get me here today because I, as noted, handle federal relations work, and of course the IIJ and the IRA has been of great interest to our 837 member cities across the state of Minnesota. And so on behalf of the League, thank you for having this hearing today. As I mentioned, the League does represent the collective interests of cities across the state, 837 in total. That's cities as big as Minneapolis and as small as Amboy, city of 25 or so. So we have a wide array of issues that are presented before our cities, but certainly when it comes to federal funding and the state's ability to help assist cities with accessing that federal funding, it's of great interest to our organization. So in terms of the IIJ and the IRA, obviously the funding and the policy spans across a wide array of topics and infrastructure, not just energy and environment. So in addition to what you heard from Mr. Kelly in terms of energy, power grid, climate resilience, and adaptation, there's also funding and policy for transit and broadband and roads and bridges, water, rail, environment and public lands, airports, and all of those other subcategories generally in the law do have some degree of sustainability component to them, which was the administration and Congress's priority for both laws. I won't go into as much detail as the Department of Commerce did with all of the programs, but I do want to highlight some of the provisions that are of importance to our member cities. Yes.
And can I interrupt for just a second, just so members know that there was a handout within your packets that go over some of this information, I bet, that Mr. Lightfoot's going to share, just so people can check it out.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members, for identifying the nifty handout before you that has some high-level information on it as well. Some of the key programs that cities are interested in that are tracking in the IIJA on water infrastructure, $668 million over 5 years is coming to the state for the Clean Water and Drinking Water State Revolving Funds. That program includes funding for drinking water lead service line replacement and emerging contaminants. I do want to note on the weatherization program that Mr. Kelly mentioned. While that program doesn't necessarily flow directly to cities, that $76.2 million will come to the state over 5 years to help upgrade housing stock and lower energy costs for households by increasing energy efficiency, which is a priority for so many of our cities across the state. Mr. Kelly mentioned the boost that the both bills gave to the Energy Efficiency Conservation Block Grant. That is direct funding that flows from the federal government to cities to help reduce fossil fuel emissions, et cetera. The Grid Resiliency Program, that's $6.05 million annual allocation to modernize power grids against extreme weather, as well as some other programs, including the Grid Resilience Innovation Program, is a couple of programs that cities are looking at. And overall, the concept of resiliency when it comes to infrastructure is very important to local units of government, and so many of these programs place an emphasis on that. On EV charging, the National Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Formula Program will provide $68 million to the state of Minnesota over the federal fiscal year 22 to 26 to build out the state's identified alternative fuel corridors according to a state plan. I should also note that generally covers major highways and roads. There is also a discretionary federal program that will provide $2.5 billion for charging and fueling infrastructure and $20.5 million to the state annually for the carbon reduction program to assist with the deployment of some alternative fuel vehicles. This is a big priority for a lot of our cities, both in the metro and in greater Minnesota, to try to build out electric vehicle charging infrastructure, and these programs will help us do so. One thing to mention too on the IIJA on cybersecurity, this was touched on briefly earlier. There is a specific state and local government cybersecurity program that was authorized by the IIJA, which will help cities directly address cyber needs, especially in the fields of critical infrastructure, water, wastewater treatment plants that are critical. Moving on to the Inflation Reduction Act, which really built on the IIJA investments in terms of climate and sustainability. It is the most significant legislation in U.S. history to strengthen our state and nation's energy security and climate resiliency. In terms of the funding, there is federal funding to support, as Mr. Kelly mentioned, state and local implementation of energy codes to support community resilience and lower energy costs for residents. As far as the tax credits in the IRA, traditionally, non-tax entities were not eligible to receive tax credits for obvious reasons. They don't pay taxes. There is a new mechanism in the IRA to allow tax-exempt entities such as cities to take advantage of many of the new clean energy tax incentives included in the law through a concept called a payment in lieu of tax credit, which will help buy down some of the costs of some of those infrastructure projects, as well as things like purchasing a new clean vehicle, clean commercial vehicle, installing solar arrays, et cetera, that will help reduce the cost of some of those projects to our local units of government. In addition to the IRA and the IIJA and what's in it, I think it's important for this committee and the legislature to consider what needs to happen before we can access some of these things. So our ask, which you'll see on that one pager, is first and foremost swiftly pass the non-federal match required for the IIJA. Of the $7.4 billion, 84% of those programs need a non-federal cost share that the state legislature will have to pass to access those funds. no match, no money. So our cities won't be able to access any of those programs if that match isn't passed. And that's not just match for the energy and climate related programs, but across the board. So $6.1 billion in total over the next 5 years. In addition to that, the authorization of state funding to assist cities facing cost and resource barriers to actually apply for those federal grants, either flowing through state agencies or at the discretionary level at the federal funding level. 70% of Minnesota cities have a population of less than 4,000, which means our city operations are extremely small with probably 1 or 2 people working in City Hall. Any type of funding for the agencies to provide additional technical assistance for those new programs, or the authorization of resources that could go directly to cities to help with the cost of pre-engineering requirements, pre-application requirements that often are prohibitive for small cities to even attempt to apply for any of this funding would be extremely helpful. And then in addition to that, requiring collaboration between state and local governments. We've already seen a lot of that. The Department of Commerce has done an excellent job in getting information out, as have many of other state agencies. But we want to increase collaboration to make sure that we maximize the impact of the IIJA and the IRA. And then lastly, and I can stand for questions, just encouraging all of our state agencies to consolidate grant opportunities whenever we can. And also avoid adding any additional requirements to any program applications that could make it harder for especially smaller, less resource cities to apply. With that, Madam Chair, I'm happy to stand for questions either now or later in the hearing.
Well, thank you for your input or for your presentation, Mr. Lightfoot. And I think what we'll do is have this next series of presenters go and we'll hold questions till the end, if that will work. But appreciate your highlighting especially the need for capacity for many of our cities across the state. And coming from a local, I used to serve on a city council. It's important. Cities need some help at this really great opportunity. So thanks for that.
Absolutely. Thank you, Madam Chair, members.
And next, we're going to hear from Center for Energy and the Environment from the President, Chris Steffen. Please welcome to the committee. Enter or tell us your name and proceed with your testimony.
All right. Thank you, Madam Chair. Good to be with you here today. Madam Chair, members, my name is Chris Dufferin. I'm President of Center for Energy and Environment. And today I'm going to cover just the energy efficiency provisions that are in these two bills. I'm going to refer to them as IJA and IRA because it's just faster and I only have 7 minutes. So, so IJA, as Mr. Kelly pointed out, is largely competitive funding. And here's just a slide to kind of demonstrate that it's a process that's involved in receiving this funding. There's certain opportunities that rolled out last year. Mr. Kelly covered a number of those, some that are continuing on through the year, and it's really up to states and their partners as well as other organizations to go out and compete for these funding and put together solid proposals, and at times, oftentimes, as Mr. Lightfoot pointed out, with matching funds in order to be competitive. Some examples of energy efficiency opportunities in IJA are on this slide, and I won't go through them all. You'll see there's a couple of cases where there are formula-based opportunities, but the majority of these are competitive proposals. I did want to touch on one that Mr. Kelly mentioned that we're very involved in on building codes. And this is an opportunity where IJA has laid out a competitive grant to advance current codes, to enforce codes that are already on the books, to better train our workforce. And we think it's important to win this first opportunity under IJA with building codes because it really sets us up as a state for the larger opportunity that's in IRA. It's a much larger sum of money, as you can see there. 2/3 of the funding of the IRA funds for building codes go towards states that are willing and able to move towards net zero energy codes. And we're not sure yet on those IRA funds whether those will be competitive or whether they will be somewhat formulaic, but we do know that it's really those states that are trying to maximize their energy savings through their building codes that are going to get the funding. Moving on to some IRA opportunities. These are more formula-based, but again, there are some competitive opportunities in IRA as well, and I'll touch on one in a little bit. But I did want to start with the tax incentives. So the bill laid out a couple of different tax incentives, one for commercial properties, and this is actually an existing tax incentive right now, but when a commercial building owner reduces their energy use by 25% or more, they can qualify for this tax credit. The tax credit was actually lowered for those buildings that do not use prevailing wages on their jobs, and was increased dramatically for those that do use prevailing wages. Another tax credit, or set of tax credits really, are the residential tax incentives. There was some of this that was existing, but it was dramatically increased. The first part that increased from 10% to 30% are tax credits that are available for building shell upgrades, for heating systems and air conditioning units, and then a higher separate cap. So that first one has a cap of $1,200. There's a separate higher cap for electrification measures in residential property. So air source heat pumps, heat pump water heaters, that's a cap of $2,000. And that is because of their combined potential both to increase efficiency as well as to help us towards decarbonization goals. There's even a deduction in there for energy audits, but we're still waiting on the guidance for that to come. All of these are in place as of January 1st. Mr. Kelly mentioned the rebate programs that are coming, and I just wanted to go a little bit deeper on these. The homes rebate is a new rebate program. It requires the State Energy Office to put together a proposal. The rebates need to be verified by a third party, so the amount of energy savings that a homeowner or a rental property owner has in their building needs to be actually verified. There's various tiers. There's a low tier of 15%. That's pretty common in energy efficiency retrofits. Some of the higher tiers are a little bit less common, but they receive additional funding. And then there's additional rebate dollars for low and moderate income households, as well as rebates for multifamily properties. The second rebate program is the high efficiency electric homes rebate, and that is again something that the state will need to apply for. There's two different income tiers. It's not available to everyone. Anyone above 150% area median income cannot receive this. In addition to that, these are point of sale rebates. So the idea is that when you buy this equipment, that you would actually be able to get the rebate at point of sale. At the same time, you can't double count these rebates with the previous rebates, and there's income verification involved. So there's a lot for the State Energy Office to figure out. So if you want to know why they need a little bit of patience to put these plans together, I think that's your reason right there. These are not cut and dry. One competitive opportunity I did want to touch on is the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund. So these are funds for state lending activities, $27 billion in total. $7 billion of this is competitive grants for zero energy technologies for low-income households or low-income communities, disadvantaged communities. And another $20 billion that's available for other technologies that lower greenhouse gas emissions. $8 billion of that $20 billion, again, needs to be in disadvantaged communities. So a lot of the funding for this, which is all lending activity, is really geared towards lower income and disadvantaged communities. All of this money, the $20 billion, is intended to leverage other money, so private capital, public capital, that can help us grow the pool that's available for folks who are harder to lend to based on their income or on their debt ratios. So we're waiting for guidance on how to apply for these. Those should be out at any point. The act passed in August. The 180-day mark is in mid-February, and so we expect guidance on this very soon. And I'll just touch on the last two opportunities here. we're going to need a lot of people to do the work in order to make these installations. So the home efficiency contractor training grants is an opportunity we're tracking, but there hasn't been guidance yet on that. I don't know that that's going to be enough really to train the number of people that need to be trained in these fields, but it's an important step. And then there's another tax credit as well for new homes for builders who want to build much more efficient homes, both Energy Star homes as well as zero energy ready homes. And you can see those amounts there. So I think with that, that's the end of my testimony. Happy to take questions when you like.
Thank you, Mr. Duffrin. I think we're going to hold off I think we'll hold off until the others have presented, and then we'll do it all at once. So next we have Logan O'Grady, Executive Director of the Minnesota Solar Energy Industries Association. Welcome to the committee, and please enter your name for the record.
Well, good afternoon, Madam Chair. For the record, my name is Logan O'Grady. I'm the Executive Director of the Minnesota Solar Energy Industries Association. I'm hoping this isn't the last time that I show up at this committee, but since it's the first, I will give a little bit of background about MNSEA for those of you who might not be familiar. MNSEA is a 501c6 trade organization. We're completely funded, driven, and directed by our 140 member companies throughout the state of Minnesota. All of our members work in every facet of solar and energy storage, from small residential electricians to large-scale utility developers. The majority of our members have 40 or under employees, so really at our core, MNSEA is a small business advocacy organization working to move Minnesota solar and storage forward to create a robust, sustainable, competitive marketplace for solar in Minnesota. We work across the aisle and in between the aisles to make sure we're building the grid of the 21st century. This 21st century grid is cleaner, more resilient, more secure, and provides more choice to Minnesotans looking to have cleaner energy options. I'm here today specifically to talk about some of the recent federal legislation that has passed and what its impact will be on our industry. But before I do that, I'd like to encourage the legislature and this committee to really follow suit in what the federal government has done and view strong policies like that as how our members view them and how business owners and entrepreneurs from around the country view them as business signals, telling them that Minnesota is a great place to do business, come and invest, hire local, usually union labor. That's how our members view strong public policy. So I know that you are all going to be taking up different issues this session, 100% bill, community solar, modernization, and more, and energy storage, hopefully. So that's just how I would say we look at those strong public policies. I know that people have talked about the IIJA. I'll focus my comments a little bit more on the IRA, and we've provided this handout that kind of outlines some of how the IRA has really stimulated our economy here, and we're looking forward to about a decade plus of certainty for our industry and our members. When fully implemented, the IRA will stimulate local manufacturing, including for MNSEA member Helene Solar up on the Iron Range. Create local jobs, as I mentioned, local electrician jobs and union jobs, and make constructing and deploying solar energy more efficient. The two largest issues within the IRA that are important are the extension and increase of the investment tax credit and the reinstatement and expansion of the production tax credit. And just note, you have to choose which one you would use. You can't use both. So that's important to note. So what's nice about the ITC and how the federal government wrote it is it's actually retroactive. And so a lot of our member companies have put projects on hold while there was some of this uncertainty and supply chain issues. Well, that was retroactive. So now all those projects can come through the pipeline. Larger projects of 1 megawatt and above, a project owner can increase their ITC percentage from a base of 6% to up to 70% by meeting prevailing wage and labor requirements, citing projects within certain communities, tribal lands, and low-income communities, and as well as using Minnesota-made products, iron, steel, and U.S.-made materials. What's also exciting about the ITC is it's now available to standalone storage, which will stimulate our nascent and burgeoning energy storage industry that we're just beginning to build here. So moving on to the production tax credit, that originally expired in 2021, but the IRA reinstates that, and that per kilowatt hour credit for the first time ever is going to be made available to solar as well. Some key elements within these programs are transferability. So these tax credits can be transferred to another taxpayer, removing the need for tax equity investors and reducing transaction costs and speeding up timelines to deploy projects. Direct pay utilities, co-ops, municipal electric utilities can receive these tax incentive payments directly from the IRS, which again streamlines projects in the development pipeline and encourages further development, even in greater Minnesota. And then again, just noting storage. This makes standalone storage eligible, which will help deploy clean energy storage, which we haven't seen a bunch of development yet in that. So that's some exciting stuff. Happy to answer questions or stick around. Again, overall, we really encourage the legislature to follow the federal government's, what they've done and create these strong public policies that create a strong market for the solar and energy storage industry in Minnesota. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. O'Grady, for your testimony. Next, we have Lisa Polish, Director of the Clean Energy Resource Teams. Welcome to the committee. Please state your name for the record.
Madam Chair, members, good afternoon. Great to be with you. My name is Lisa Polish, and I serve as the statewide director for a partnership called the Clean Energy Resource Teams. And let's see if I can multitask. Apparently, the short answer is no.
We're doing good on time. There you go.
Okay. Very briefly, CERTS is a partnership. So I'm based at the University of Minnesota Extension's Regional Sustainable Development Partnerships. And then I take a deep breath every time I do my intro. But our partners include the Great Plains Institute, the Minnesota Department of Commerce, and the Southwest Regional Development Commission. And we have a mission to connect communities to the resources that they need to both identify and then implement. That's a big focus of ours, getting to action, community-based clean energy projects. I'm actually going to share a couple of things about what we are hearing from people around the state about the IRA and the IIJA. Those have already been defined, so I'm assuming we can use acronyms from here on out. I would say the number one thing that we're hearing from folks is that we are going to need a lot of collaboration and a lot of information sharing to actually make all of these resources tangible and accessible on the ground to communities. So everything that you've heard everybody talk about already today requires a whole lot of actors to all come together to make sure that your constituents actually know about and can access all of these opportunities. So utilities are going to play a huge role in that. Local and regional governments are going to play a huge role in that. Tribal nations, schools, businesses, and organizations. And I think it's incumbent on our group like ours to make sure that we are providing readily accessible information at all times and looking to see who else, what other partners we can work with to get information out. So I wanted to share a really tangible example because I think that that makes it more accessible. So you all are familiar with heat pumps or air source heat pumps or cold climate air source heat pumps. I feel like in energy we are able to use more acronyms than nearly any other field, but probably you all would tell me I was wrong. Heat pumps are this, we refer to them as the magical device that can be more energy efficient in terms of both heating and cooling. CERTS has for years been working on helping people understand what a heat pump is, what it does, how you use it in your home. This is an example of a guide that we put together so that an average everyday consumer can understand what is a heat pump. We have a similar guide that contractors can use when they're trying to educate a household about what a heat pump is. We actually worked very closely with utilities and folks from the Department of Commerce and folks at CEE to actually put together the guide in the first place. And we do the information sharing, but one of the things you've already been hearing about is what does the workforce look like for us to actually implement all of this work? Well, there's an air source heat pump collaborative that CEE staffs that actually does training for folks. There are utilities that have particular incentives and have been working really hard to make sure that their cooperative members, for example, are well aware of heat pumps. This is one small item, and it's referring to a $2,000 tax credit here, one small item in the Inflation Reduction Act. And there's going to be a whole lot of work just to get people up to speed on what is a heat pump and why would I buy it and how does it work and how does it work with my existing heating system. So I think there's going to be ample opportunity for collaboration. And we've created a resource page actually that is tracking everything that we can as up to date as we possibly can. So if you were to log on to this page today, you would see that there were updates made yesterday based on new issuances from the IRS in terms of the provisions that are there. We're doing our best to keep it up to date and also to flag some opportunities that might be less common. There's one on here for Energy Star manufactured homes. There are over 180,000 manufactured homes in Minnesota. Many of them are actually quite old, were maybe not designed for this climate, and there might be opportunities through some of the resources that are available to do upgrades. One of the other things that we've been trying to talk about is what does it look like for rural small businesses? What does it look like for farmers? What are the provisions that are in here? You haven't heard quite as much about that today, but the Rural Energy for America program, also known as REAP, saw a massive increase in funding and also has grant dollars that are increased up to 40% for a project. We provide technical assistance to businesses trying to understand how to capture these dollars, and I think that there are more and more opportunities for businesses all over the state to use this and to combine it with existing programs like property assessed clean energy and or to combine it with other tax credits to actually capture these benefits for both energy efficiency and renewable energy projects in their businesses and farms. You've now heard about direct pay or the cash in lieu payment. I want to just briefly mention that this is also available for nonprofits, faith communities, and is also a tool that can be used by municipal and cooperative utilities for their own projects. And so thinking about sort of what might that look like for projects on the ground that they would advance, like a community solar garden or others. But there are projects that include geothermal and combined heat and power that are also available through this direct pay provision. The number one question that we get from folks right now is, can you come and talk to our local group about what is in this? So we've recorded presentations. Apparently one was shown in Fargo-Moorhead the other day. We've done some in Mankato. We do them for faith groups. We do them for other communities. But the very next question is now the right time for me? Should I buy this tomorrow? Should I have bought it yesterday? There's already fear that people are missing out on the opportunities that might be there. And there's also a lot of interest from a lot of different providers, be it utilities or local governments, to make sure that their constituents know how to access these resources. We're hoping to provide as much as we can of a one-stop shop, but to be able to work in partnership and collaboration so that anyone else that might have resources and information that help people access the dollars are available. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Ms. Polish. I appreciate the testimony. If you're looking for some tips on videos, I think we have some video stars amongst us that could maybe help you out there. But thank you for your testimony. Next up, we have Bree Halverson with the Blue Green Alliance. Welcome to the committee. Please state your name for the record.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, committee. My name is Bree Halverson. I'm the Midwest Director for the Blue Green Alliance. It's a national partnership of labor unions and environmental organizations that was started here in Minnesota. So, and I'm here today to talk about just sort of, not surprising, the labor provisions in both of those bills. So we think the transformational power of the Inflation Reduction Act and the bipartisan infrastructure law cannot be overstated. Together, they will revitalize the U.S. manufacturing, grow clean energy, and support and create good union jobs in Minnesota and around the country. They will also significantly reduce climate emissions, and the Inflation Reduction Act alone will tackle climate change by reducing emissions up to 42% by 2030. And just to let you know, you have my testimony written, and so some of these facts, the websites and reports where we got that are going to be on that, so just to let you know. In both bills, there are a number of good mechanisms that will ensure the investment made are used to create good paying union jobs. That's really important because the bills will be creating millions of jobs across the country. And in fact, an analysis from the Political Economy Research Institute and at the University of Minnesota of Massachusetts Amherst, commissioned by the Blue Green Alliance, found that more than 100 climate, energy, and environmental investments in the Inflation Reduction Act will create more than 9 million jobs over the next decade across the country. I'm here today to talk about how we can maximize both the number of jobs created here in Minnesota, but also how we can make sure these transformative bills deliver real results for real workers in the form of good paying, safe union jobs. So I will just jump. to sort of what those provisions are. Both bills use a number of mechanisms to help achieve that goal. I want to make sure I highlight a few of those. One, of course, is Davis-Bacon. The provision established a wage floor for each occupation that all contractors on a project must pay at or above. This typically sets to reflect the average or market wage. So that's important. Registered apprenticeship, pre-apprenticeship, and other union-affiliated training programs. Heard that we're going to need workers and we're going to need to get them trained. We believe that these are the best way that workers can build a better life for themselves and their families. The Blue-Green Alliance analysis of U.S. Department of Labor Registered Apprenticeship Partners Information Database Systems, or RAPIDS, found that in the construction industry, 43% of apprentices were people of color in union programs compared to 33% of people of color in non-union programs. So we just think that that's a really great tool to be able to diversify the workforce. Of course, using mechanisms like project labor agreements, community workforce agreements, and community benefit agreements. So project labor agreements is the outside construction, and community workforce agreements and community benefit agreements can help sort of identify other sort of jobs inside after things are built, or just sort of community benefits to help sort of with housing and other things that community people need. Workers must have the freedom to exercise their right to collectively bargain. We think that that will make sure that we are able to maximize these dollars. And then Justice 40 and other targeted community investments are mechanisms in the bill to ensure that new government policies help dismantle structural racism and target federal resources to the workers and communities that need them the most. So President Biden established Justice 40 initiative to ensure that 40% of federal investment benefits of disadvantaged communities. And then finally, these laws will be support and create high quality union jobs, not only in construction sites, but at manufacturing facilities across the supply chain. The use of strong Buy American or Buy America provisions should be included. We think building a clean energy future here in Minnesota and the United States means that we also need to have strong manufacturing. Let me conclude with this. These tools are all there in the toolbox to make sure that these laws deliver for Minnesotans, but it's up to us to make sure that we use them and include them. So the Blue-Green Alliance encourages that you act swiftly to match funds and to move projects forward and that will create and sustain good paying union jobs for workers in the state, while also reducing emissions. It's a great win-win, and that is the Blue-Green Alliance's motto. So thank you for your time today, Madam Chair.
Thank you for your testimony, Ms. Helverson. And last but not least, we have Kevin Pranis, who's going to come to the table, Marketing Manager with LIUNA, Minnesota and North Dakota. Welcome to committee. Please state your name for the record.
Thank you, Chair Acom, committee members. Kevin Pranis on behalf of LIUNA, Minnesota and North Dakota. Our union represents 14,000 proud construction laborers who build and maintain our state's transportation, water, energy, and building infrastructure alongside fellow building trades. For decades, LIUNA men and women have worked to construct and safely maintain Minnesota's fleet of conventional and nuclear power plants, as well as our gas distribution system, and every year, more members are employed in wind and solar energy installation. When it comes to energy jobs, we have a simple proposition that clean energy jobs should be as good and as available to local workers as jobs in conventional and nuclear energy that have supported generations of Minnesotans and their families. We're here today to talk about the Inflation Reduction Act and IAJA. Those are topics close to our members' hearts. In fact, more than 2,000 men and women who are LIUNA members contacted their members of Congress from Minnesota and North Dakota to urge passage of IAJA. It's the largest mobilization in our history, and we're also very supportive of the IRA because of what it does to move our country forward in terms of building the infrastructure that we need for energy, transportation, and water, along with our other infrastructure needs. And so what does the grants and financing, the tax credits authorized by these two bills mean in terms of our interest to this committee, and how are they creating jobs? First of all, deployment, as you've heard, of established technologies, wind and solar becomes significantly more cost effective, which were already cost-effective technologies. It allows accelerated deployment, and so we're going to see a lot more wind and solar getting built. That's already creating high-quality jobs for members of our union and other unions around the state. In fact, in this past year, prior to the IRA, was the first time we had members in all corners of the state working on union renewable energy projects, solar and wind projects. But we'll see a lot more of this with the IRA thanks to the enhanced tax credits, as well as the labor provisions that explicitly incentivize developers to use local union labor, which is a cause that we've fought for many years here and seen a lot of progress in Minnesota, but there's been a problem elsewhere. We're also looking not only at established technologies, but the deployment of new and emerging clean energy technologies, including battery storage, carbon capture, clean hydrogen, geothermal, advanced nuclear, renewable natural gas, and other clean fuels. All of those mean jobs not only for laborers, but and operating engineers and carpenters, pipe fitters, boiler makers, electricians. Everybody who works in the building trades has an opportunity to contribute their skills toward these solutions that the IRA is helping make possible, especially supporting these emerging technologies. Additionally, there's support in the IRA and the infrastructure bill for existing clean technologies such as nuclear that are absolutely critical to meeting our climate goals and that are, that we're helping make more affordable for ratepayers through the bill. And then there's deployment of transmission that's absolutely essential. We won't be able to build the generation that we need without additional transmission, and we won't be able to electrify effectively without improving our grid. And then finally, there's extensive resources outside the area of energy supporting adaptation, including investments in hardening transportation infrastructure and upgrading water infrastructure to manage the more frequent storm events. All of these mean jobs and opportunities to modernize our infrastructure that's beneficial. And it's about creating these family-supporting jobs and pipelines and construction careers. That's why the link to apprenticeship is so critically important for the tax credit projects, and certainly a priority in most of the IIJA programs. And then we're targeting investments toward communities that need it most, and that's both preferences and enhancements for plant host communities that have kept the lights on for generations, as well as historically underserved communities. And this will be incredibly important for places like Becker and Cohasset, where our members and others have lived. And those are communities that have made sacrifices, lived next to power plants that weren't always popular in order to keep the lights on. And we want to make sure those communities can continue to be prosperous going forward. The IRA has lots of opportunities to refuel those facilities, use that infrastructure beneficially, not only with renewables, but also with clean hydrogen, potentially with carbon capture, and those are opportunities that we're going to be exploring. And I will point to just 3 examples recently, although these projects were all approved most of them were approved prior to the IRA. Sherco Solar that Xcel is building is going to be building up in Becker. Minnesota Power built 20 megawatts of solar using locally manufactured solar panels. And Otter Tail Power is building solar up in Fergus Falls, all of it creating good local union jobs. All of those projects will be much more affordable as a result of the IRA. They'll be able to capture those benefits, even though some of them were planned prior. What's important to consider moving forward, obviously we need to go after all of the funds. Many of these are national pools of money. There's no guarantee how much comes to Minnesota. So the matching funds are critically important, as are the investments in technical assistance to all of the potential recipients to help them, figure out how to maximize those funds. Otherwise, they go to other states. And in the case of tax credits, there's no limit to the budget for tax credits. If they don't get spent, then they don't get spent. So any projects that we can move forward are going to be beneficial in bringing money into Minnesota. Second, we want to simplify the process for deploying clean energy resources. There are still too many regulatory hurdles to building transmission, to building wind and solar and other clean energy resources that we need to address if we want to stay on our targets. Third, we need to align and leverage federal, state, and utility resources. It's a critical opportunity for us to take the money that utilities are investing in upgrading their systems and leverage that with the federal money to reduce costs for ratepayers and allow us to move forward with innovations that would previously have been too costly. And then finally, no excuse for not prioritizing high-quality jobs. And I would point out that there's great job protections for projects 1 megawatt and up in the federal bill. That's not true for smaller projects. There's lots of ways the state can also make sure that there's job protections to create high-quality jobs and support apprenticeship through these efforts. I thank the committee for your time and open for any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Prentice, for your presentation. And so we've got a few questions. If others are interested, let Mike know. So we're going to start with Representative Swazinski, and I'm not sure who you're going to address your question
Yeah,
to.
it's a little difficult with such a long line.
Sorry.
No, it's fine. Thank you, Madam Chair. Would the CEE presenter come on up, please? Thank you very much for your time and just looking at some of these residential tax incentives for the IRA on page 8 of your presentation. Would that only be for retrofits, or would that be for a brand new home builder that those would be available?
And Mr. Dufferin, and please state your name for the record, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Chris Dufferin, Center for Energy and Environment, Representative Swedzinski. Going to page 8. I want to make sure I'm on the same page 8 as you, because I'm looking at the homes rebate.
Yeah, I was just looking at the bottom. I didn't realize there was another page.
Oh,
So it would be page 7. Sorry.
Oh, okay.
Sorry, sir.
Yes, the residential tax incentives. So these are tax incentives for, let's see here. Actually, some of these would apply to new construction, and some would not. So the building envelope measures would not. That's for existing homes. But actually for equipment, you could use this potentially in a new construction situation.
Representative Swazinski.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And then so in those particular situations, would the home builder then receive the tax incentive, or would the potential purchaser receive that?
Madam Chair, Representative Swedzinski, I believe whoever pays for the equipment would receive the tax credit. So that is generally the builder.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you. And then just looking at page 9, the energy efficiency electric homes rebates. It's my understanding that would, those tax rebates from a taxable standpoint would be, whether it be electrical wiring, insulation seal. So energy switching, would that kind of help that particular, in order to qualify for those tax rebates? So if you were to switch from propane to an electric heater, would that help you to qualify for those tax incentives? Is that
Mr.
what that's
Dufferin.
doing?
Madam Chair, Representative Swedzinski, you don't have to switch fuels in order to receive these rebates, but we think that might be a common use of it, would be the actual changing of, say, propane to electric air source heat pump. However, there's also people who are using electric baseboard heat right now who are converting to a electric air source heat pump because of just how much energy savings there is there between the two.
Sounds good.
Swazinski.
Thank you. And then just that on page 10, there was that Greenhouse Reduction Fund Act. Looking at some of those competitive grants, how would that, from a municipality standpoint, what is your thought when looking at that? Would they kind of look at their energy system as a whole as they're developing it, or would they be able to target that towards businesses or city properties, or that sort of thing?
Mr. Dufferin.
Madam Chair, Representative Swedzinski, so these are for lending activities. So it would be up to states really to determine how to put together lending opportunities for different entities. And so I think there's a wide variety of building types and building ownership structures that could qualify for loans. But all of these rules is exactly what we're waiting on right now to better understand.
Representative Swazinski.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And then could the person from Mencia come up? Thank you.
Logan O'Grady. Thank you, Mr. Dufferin. Representative Swazinski, go ahead.
Yes, does you need to give his name for the record?
Oh, go ahead for the record.
Madam Chair, Logan O'Grady, Executive Director of the Minnesota Solar Energy Industries Association.
Thank you, Mr. O'Grady. Just you chat a little bit about kind of the union jobs portion and how that affects it, and then we had the folks from Luna come before us talking about how it's affected. Does your association support the the mandate that union workers are used for like solar projects below 1 megawatt?
Mr. O'Grady.
Madam Chair, Representative Swazinski, thank you for the question. In the past, we have supported amendments to previous legislation that required prevailing wage, and this bill in particular incentivizes that, so our members would be smart to take advantage of those tax credits by employing union labor.
Representative Swazinski, did you have any follow-up? No. And next, we have Representative Garofalo, and I believe his question may have also been for Mr. O'Grady.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. So either this testifier or others, there's been debates about what the capacity factor is for rooftop solar in Minnesota. Different sales agents have made different claims. I think it'd just be good for members of the committee to have an agreed upon set of facts. So from Mencia's perspective, feel free to defer to what any of the other testifiers. What is the capacity factor for rooftop solar in the state of Minnesota?
Mr. O'Grady.
Madam Chair, I would defer to the utilities because they have all the data on that. So if there's a utility member, they might be able to answer that better than I can.
Madam Chair, as long as the members of the committee are okay with that, that's fine. As long as we're all agreeing to the same numbers, that's the purpose of my question. So, if there's
Anyone from the... Yeah, I see a couple. Any takers? I don't think they're prepared for this.
Thank you. Madam Chair, a question for you. So the North American Reliability Corporation published in December their study showing that the MISO region is at risk. That's the term they use. Is reliability something that this committee will be focused on, or is that really something that's more the responsibility of outside stakeholders in the Public Utilities Commission?
Well, that's a great question, Representative Garofalo. I think reliability is incredibly important. We have lots of time this committee or this session. So if you have some ideas, come talk to me.
Thank you.
Next, we have Representative Kraft.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think this is for CEE or CERTs, but
Can we get CEE and we'll have certs on deck?
right. And
Sorry, you
so-
guys. This maybe is a little more confusing than it needs to be.
And I've got a couple
Okay,
questions.
great.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Mr. Duffrin, many of the IRA tax credits seem to be targeted towards those that own their homes. How can this be leveraged to address issues for renters, for those that don't own their facilities?
Madam Chair, Representative Kraft, so I think, with the tax credits, you are correct. They tend to be better opportunities for homeowners as well as for builders in the last case that I gave you. But they're also available to multifamily owners. And so to the extent that it incentivizes multifamily owners to integrate more energy efficiency into their buildings, and if those tenants are paying those bills, that could benefit those tenants. I think the better opportunity for rentals will be in those rebate programs, where it gives additional incentives for multifamily properties that are pretty significant. So I think that's where we'll probably see more activity for multifamily buildings. But I think we'll see some from the combination of the two. But the tenants are typically not paying for insulation. They're not paying for their own heating systems. And so they wouldn't get a tax credit for the cost of those items, if that makes sense.
Representative Kraft.
Yeah, I'm wondering if the representatives from CERTs has a comment on things that they've seen. Oh, sorry.
I think she's agreeing.
Okay, all right. Then one other question then, Mr. Duffrin. I'm interested in your comments about building codes and the competitive grants for those. What are some of the key factors that you're seeing in those two states that may be applying for support for building code.
Mr. Duffin, go ahead.
Madam Chair, Representative Kraft, I think it's those states that have adopted the most recent building codes. First of all, they're going to have the best opportunities. So that's on the commercial side, the 2019 ASHRAE 90.1 code, which we're in the process of adopting here in Minnesota. So we'll be in decent shape there. On the residential side, I think that's the 2021 IECC residential code. We're nowhere near that. We're still on the 2012 code here in Minnesota. So I think those states that have done that, and then those states that are moving more rapidly towards net zero in their codes into the 2030s that have specifically stated that and have a goal for it, and are starting to make plans on how to get there. I think those will be the most competitive states.
Representative Kraft, do you have a follow-up?
Yeah, thanks, Madam Chair. Thank Mr. Duffin. So what kinds of assistance are available through those grants?
Mr. Duffin.
Madam Chair, Representative Kraft, it's an opportunity to support adopting codes more quickly. So if you're a state that's interested in moving more quickly on your code adoption right after the federal codes come out, for states that want to enforce new codes, and then for states who want to do planning in order to get to net zero. That'll be the final stage of those grants in the IRA. There'll be an opportunity, and that's the most significant form of funding is going to be for those states that are making plans. There's an option in the 2021 code, not to get into the weeds, that is a net zero code. And so for those states that are willing to start enacting that code over time, that there will be funding to help them implement those codes.
Any follow-up?
Thank you, Madam Chair. No, I just would say that be good for us to look at energy codes.
I think so. Representative O'Neill, did you have a question?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm wondering if Mr. Pranis would come down. And while he's coming down, I just want to thank you for actually not reading your testimony and speaking to us. I appreciate that very much. You're always very personable, and I do appreciate that. You had mentioned briefly about advanced nuclear reactors, and my ears perked up. I'm really excited about that. You also talked about that we need to address regulatory hurdles, and I'm wondering if you could speak just a little bit about because there's like about 9 different advanced reactors that are in development with Department of Energy right now. And I'm wondering if there's any of those, if you happen to know which one you may be interested in, and if there's a pretty obvious regulatory hurdle here in Minnesota to move that new reactor forward, and I'm wondering what your thoughts are about removing that huge hurdle here in Minnesota to do advanced reactors.
Mr. Pranis.
Madam Chair, Representative O'Neill, I imagine that you know quite a bit more actually about the different models of reactor designs, and we have certainly know other colleagues who are educated on which types of reactors. I am not the expert at all. I think what we've seen so far is some pretty promising in terms of, and honestly, these are very different types of nuclear power plants. You're talking much more modular, more like batteries, right? I mean, more like a modular stacking. Now, that doesn't mean 1 billion yards of concrete, which is sort of sad. Someone who represents laborers, and 1 billion yards of concrete was pretty nice.
Sorry.
But unfortunately, all these new technologies are labor saving. Wind and solar are labor saving. Sort of the advanced nuclear will be labor saving. It's the way of the world. We're not going to fight it. We'll just learn to help install it. But we do think that those are critically important technologies. I'm sure that you're referencing Minnesota's current moratorium. I think it would certainly be appropriate to revisit that question in light of the climate goals that the state has, because I think a lot of other folks will be looking at deploying that. And obviously, we could buy carbon-free nuclear power from North Dakota, but we'd certainly rather see it housed here. But I think there's a whole suite of tools. It's not only nuclear, and honestly, I don't know which ones are going to be most successful. I don't know whether, for example, carbon capture gas will be cheaper, or battery storage, or nuclear to meet some of these needs. What we do know is we need to pursue all the available technologies because we don't have the answers right now.
Representative O'Neill.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, thank you for that. Just really quickly, a follow-up. So I appreciate that, and I'm also, I know that is a piece of the puzzle, but it is a base load carbon-free source. And I also want to just thank you that you acknowledge host communities, which I am a member of the host community for the Monticello Nuclear Power Plant, and not really far from Sherco. So I've spent a lot of my life living in a community that had both of those things happening. And I know that there has been a 10-year extension for the Monticello Nuclear Power Plant. It's not complete yet, but it looks pretty good. And eventually they're going to go to Prairie Island to do the same. So your folks will probably still be working. There's a lot to keep those up and running, as you know, and maybe even to do some remodel inside and get a little bit more capacity out of it. So I appreciate that. So do you have any thoughts? They talked a little bit about the hydrogen hub, which of course is not just, it's very similar actually, and works hand in hand with advanced reactors, which is you're producing hydrogen, you're storing it, you're transporting it, and you're actually using it. That would be the hub, right? So I was interested to see what are we trying to fund here in Minnesota. Do you know anything about those projects as far as like what would labor be doing? Are you excited about those types of things as a labor representative?
We're very excited about hydrogen, Chair, Representative. We're very excited about the hydrogen potential. Again, hydrogen is something that can be used about 15 different ways, and so which technologies will prove out, again, is somewhat unclear. I mean, everything from blending with gas to using as a storage vehicle where you're just producing hydrogen with excess energy, say wind or nuclear at night, and then burning it during the day without producing carbon. And so there's a lot of potential, I think, in anything like hydrogen. If you're burning it, you're looking at something that looks sort of like a gas, a very similar sort of burner as a gas power plant. And so installing that, there's often a lot of piping, which is something that pipe fitters work on in other trades. There tends to be, some amount of concrete. And also if it pairs well with nuclear or wind, that's an opportunity to build and to support financially the nuclear or the wind that we're building, as well as the sort of hydrogen asset. So it'll depend what's involved in it, but we certainly see a variety of pipeline and piping opportunities and facility opportunities to create these hubs. But honestly, these are top secret conversations, I gather. ERC doesn't share its secrets until they're ready, I know. So we look forward to learning more about it and figuring out what the work is.
Thank you. Thanks for all that, Mr. Pranis.
Great. We've got just a couple minutes left, so maybe our final question here, Representative Igo. I don't know who you're.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. If I could speak to Mr. O'Grady, please. So my question here is we talked a lot about solar, all the different things that are going on. My concern, I figured you'd be the best to ask, is how are our supply chains? I mean, we're talking about billions of dollars of investment. Are we going to be able to keep up with this amount of solar output?
Mr. O'Grady.
Madam Chair and Representative Igo, thank you for the question. I really appreciate the meetings we've had in your office to talk about some of these things. I would say about 90 or to 95% of the panels that our members buy right now come from China. And I think that all of our members would appreciate more choice in where they can obtain their materials and their supplies from, especially because we have a great panel manufacturer here in Minnesota.
Representative Igo.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I think that you made my point right there. 90% of our panels are coming from China, which means they're coming with no labor standards, no environmental standards, come across the ocean on ocean liners. And all it takes is a quick Google search to discover just how polluting those panels are and how horrible they are. In fact, the U.S. Department of Commerce had to put a ban on them because they were dumping them in our country. So we need to find a solution. Thank you.
Thank you. And certainly a lot of information today about the possibilities and opportunities with the federal programs. And so hopefully we can be a good partner with many of these organizations and agencies to take best opportunity or best advantage of the opportunities available. With that, this meeting is adjourned and we'll see you all tomorrow.